The following compilation features unsettling and spine-chilling tales sourced from Reddit's horror communities. Reader discretion is strongly advised. These narratives may contain graphic descriptions, psychological distress, and themes that could unsettle sensitive individuals. Proceed with caution, as immersion into these eerie stories may provoke fear, unease, and sleep disturbances. Enter this realm of Reddit's creepy horror stories at your own risk, as the line between reality and the macabre may blur within these chilling narratives. Story 1. My best friend is obsessed with the 27 Club. Self-harm. It all started the day we found Charlie's sister in the barn. Erica had returned to our little town from the city to celebrate her 27th birthday. She was sporting a nose ring and had choppy black hair. She had brought her boyfriend Blake with her. With his long black hair and dark wayfarers, Charlie and I were 14 at the time and thought they looked like rock stars. Their parents had arranged a party on the grounds of their property. Charlie and I had our first taste of alcohol that night and coughed our guts up when Erica and Blake let us take drags of their cigarettes. "I love you, Chaz," said Erica, her arms around Charlie and me. "You too, Glenn. Promise me you boys will do whatever makes you happy." We had no idea it was her way of saying goodbye. The next day, there was confusion in the house when Erica and Blake were nowhere to be seen. They'd spent the night in her old bedroom. I'd spent the night on Charlie's bedroom floor. "Did you see your sister leave?" asked his mom. We hadn't. She wasn't answering her cell either. Later that day, Charlie and I went to the barn to look for Erica. When we opened the doors, we saw her lying in the arms of Blake on a bed of straw. We put it down to too much vodka. "We found them," yelled Charlie. "Wake up, sleepyheads." As we got closer, we saw an empty bottle of vodka, along with a small empty pot for high-strength sleeping pills, the kind for prescription only. "Erica," said Charlie, shaking his sister. "She was out cold." "Glenn, she's not breathing." Blake started to stir like he was in pain. "Mr. and Mrs. Morgan," I screamed, running out of the barn. Erica and Blake were rushed to the hospital. As feared, Erica was dead at the scene. Blake had his stomach pumped and was put in a ward to recover. She wanted this. He managed through God knows what other drugs they had put him on. "What the fuck do you mean?" said Erica's dad, grabbing Blake by the front of his smock. He had to be escorted out in tears along with his wife. I sat with Charlie until my parents could come pick me up. We just stared at Blake, this guy who we had thought was so cool, pale with greasy black hair plastered to his face. "She got in. Dudes," he said. "What did she get in?" said Charlie, close to tears. "My sister is dead." "But she's with them now." He looked up. "Morrison, Joplin, Hendricks. Who are you talking about?" I said. "Only the greatest to ever live. The 27 Club." He stepped out of bed, wincing, pulling out the tubes in his arms. I still remember the trickles of blood running down his wrists. "What the hell is the 27 Club?" "Strictly members only," he said. "No admittance to anyone even a day before or after turning 27. I turned 2 weeks ago, and we were saving it to go together, forever 27 with the legends." He walked to the window. "Say, what floor are we on?" I shrugged. 6th, I think." He looked out and turned with a grin. "I bet she's up there partying with Cobain as we speak." He opened the window. "Blake," said Charlie, "I think you should get back in bed." "Forever 27, boys," he said. "See you in a few years." He leapt from the window, making Charlie and I cry out in unison. We heard a gruesome thud as he hit something hard. When I braved a peek, he was face down on the roof of an ambulance. After the events, Charlie became obsessed with the 27 Club. When we turned 16, he wanted to form a suicide pact. We would wait until we both turned 27, then end it together. "These people meant nothing to you," I said. "When did you ever talk about the Doors?" or Jimi Hendrix, and everyone has those fucking Nirvana t-shirts. It means nothing. It's not just that, Glenn, he said. It's honoring my sister. You loved Erica too. I did. But she had problems. Charlie, it's not even a real club. It's not a conspiracy. It's not some amazing club where they're all living it up in paradise. They're unfortunate coincidences. Plenty of other cool people have died at 26 or 28. Before I could react, he pulled out a penknife and sliced open my right palm. I screamed, Jesus, what the fuck, Charlie? He did the same to himself, barely reacted to the pain, then gripped my hand in his. Forever 27. We're bound by blood now. My brother. You're fucking crazy, I said, leaving his house. My hand kept slipping on the handlebar of my bike until I got home to patch myself up. Some years passed, and I'd kept my distance from Charlie. I started college and got a new circle of friends. I remember July 23rd, 2011 like it was yesterday. I was 21. Even before Charlie texted me, I knew he would as soon as I heard the news. Amy Winehouse is dead. She was 27. The scar on my right palm began to ache. I wasn't going to contribute to crazy, so I ignored him. I met with my girlfriend Laurie and our group of friends for a night out. Of course, Winehouse was the topic of the evening. She had managed to become a cultural phenomenon in such a short amount of time, and her death was genuinely hard-hitting. And what better way to celebrate the life of a tortured soul than by keeping the drinks flowing and partaking in the coke our friend Shane had scored. Are you guys familiar with the concept of the 27 Club? Asked Laurie. I swallowed my whiskey and cleared my throat. Yeah, that's an exclusive group of celebrities who croaked it at 27. Right, said Shane. Exactly, she said. Anyone who's anyone is part of that club. She held up a glass to Amy and the 27 Club. Hear, hear, said Shane. May she forever shoot up with my idol, Kurt Cobain, in that big club in the sky. That's a bit insensitive, I said. She literally died hours ago. Have some respect. I'm respecting, buddy, he said. This is all for her. Are you okay, Glenn? Said Laurie. My palm was burning. I ran a finger over the scar and held it up to them. I never told you how I got this, I said. My childhood best friend, Charlie. His sister killed herself when she was 27. Her boyfriend, too. Shit, said Shane. Charlie did this to me when we were 16. He cut my hand and made us blood brothers. He wanted me to make a suicide pact, that we would end it at 27. Glenn, I had no idea, said Laurie. I pushed it away. I said, I cut all ties with him, but he texted me today, funnily enough, on the day the 27 Club gets a new member. I feel awful, said Shane. If I'd known, I wouldn't have. Look, it's fine, I said. I'm all for celebrating life or death. I guess I'm just being sensitive. It kind of all came back. A few more years passed. Laurie and I were married and had a baby boy, Jack. We lived in a house not a million miles away from where I grew up. One week, I was feeling particularly agitated, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I realized what it was when I spoke to my mom on the phone. Will you be seeing Charlie for his birthday? She asked. I know you boys don't see each other as much as you used to, but you were inseparable once upon a time. I hear it's the big 2-7. He could probably use the support. What with, well, you know. I'll message him, I said before saying goodbye. I didn't want to be a prick, so I kept it polite. Hey, Charlie, I wish you a happy birthday. Maybe we can meet for a drink sometime soon. I'm only like 2 hours away from our old town. Love, Glenn. About an hour later, I got a notification. Glenn, my brother, thank you for the birthday wishes. I hear you have a little one of your own now. Me too, little Joseph. I would love to meet for a drink sometime. You stay in touch. Love, your friend Charlie. What was most surprising about it was that he didn't mention his age at all. There was no "I'm 27 now," and you know what that means. Years of guilt hit me like a sledgehammer to the teeth. I had neglected who was once my most important friend due to an admittedly messed up experience, but clearly one he could have used more support with. I had abandoned him. The scar on my hand burned as if to remind me of the wrong I'd done to him. A few days later, I reached out again. I suggested we meet at one of our old haunts, but he invited me to his home on account of watching his son. He was still based in our old town and had a nice but modest house. Courtesy of the rents, he said. Charlie's parents had done rather well for themselves and owned several properties around town. I'd like you to meet someone. There was a basket perched on a wooden frame, and out he pulled a baby wrapped in a blanket. His little eyes were half open. "This is Joseph. Say hello to your Uncle Glenn." He handed Joseph to me, who I awkwardly cradled in my arms until I found the right position. "He's the spit of you, Charlie," I said, looking down at his cute little face. He reached up and grabbed my nose with his sharp baby nails. "Forgot how much that stings," I said. "Jack is currently enjoying his terrible twos. He's a bit of a handful for Laurie and myself at times." "Come sit down," he said. "How is the old ball and chain?" I laughed. "She's actually perfect. I can't recall a single disagreement we had, other than what to name Jack. She wanted to name him Donald after her grandfather. That wasn't going to happen." He laughed. "Where's your better half? Anyway, I don't think we ever met." He looked down. "Susie. She's no longer with us. It's just little Joey and me. Charlie, I'm so sorry. It wasn't long after his birth. She just didn't wake up one morning." He smiled. "We disagreed about his name, too. I wanted to name him Joseph after Joseph Merrick, more commonly known as the Elephant Man. He was the first official member of the 27 Club." I took in a deep breath as I felt unease set in. "Charlie, you can't still be obsessed with that club." He reached over and took Joseph from me. "Did you hear Anton Yelchin is also a member now? Don't try and tell me it's not real." "Okay, I'm gonna leave you to it," I said. "Charlie, promise me you'll look after yourself and Joseph. You know where I am if you need any help." "Appreciated," he said, laying Joseph down in the basket. "Say, isn't your birthday coming up soon?" I gulped. "Yeah, in a few weeks. Laurie and I are having a weekend in the Hamptons." I lied. "Ah, good for you," he said. "I hope the weather holds out for you." He held out his hand, palm side up, clearly showing me the scar we shared. "Put it there, brother." I firmly yet quickly shook his hand and made my way out of his house. "He's still not right," I said to Laurie later that evening. "It's been over 10 years and he's still obsessed with that fucking club. Try to be more sensitive, Glenn. He lost his sister, and now his wife too, as well as raising a baby on his own. The poor guy is probably so lost right now." "I'm trying, Laurie, but that little reminder of my birthday didn't sit right with me. It was like, remember what that means. The thing is, it means nothing to me. I didn't agree to a damn thing. I didn't ask for this scar." She kissed the top of my head. "I'm putting Jack to bed, then taking a bath. Why don't you listen to one of your podcasts? Take your mind off things." "Good idea, honey," I said, but not before the tickle monster attacks. I grabbed Jack and blew raspberries on his belly, which sent him into fits of giggles. "Okay, that's enough excitement for one day," said Laurie. "Give me a hug," I said to Jack. "Good night, buddy." "Night, Daddy," he said, then disappeared upstairs with Laurie. I put in my earbuds and started listening to the latest How Bizarre podcast. I was content for all of 10 minutes when I started thinking about Charlie. I opened Google and typed in Charlie Morgan, followed by our hometown. One of the first results was from a local newspaper. The headline was something like, "Redacted man becomes single father after sudden tragedy." It mentioned his wife Susie had passed away from breathing complications during sleep. My heart skipped a beat when I read she was 27 at the time of death. I then started to groan as my scar burned as if freshly cut. I knew in my heart Charlie was responsible for Susie's death. I was turning 27 in just over 2 weeks. I called my mom. "You sound agitated." "Sweetheart," she said, "what's the matter?" "Why didn't you tell me about Charlie's wife?" "I did. I mentioned how he's had a rough go of it in life, but you didn't seem to be interested. Too occupied with childish rivalries or whatever you call it." I felt terrible. "I'm sorry. Mother, did you attend the funeral?" "I did. Don't worry. I mentioned how busy you were and you would have been there if you could." "Mom, do you think there's any chance Charlie knows where we live?" "Would that be a bad thing? You were best friends. After all, can you just answer me, please?" "Yes. He knows where you live. Was I not supposed to tell him during his crisis? Should I have read your mind?" No. I'm sorry. Mom, I'm not mad. Look, Laurie and I are thinking of going to the Hamptons for my birthday weekend. Would you be able to have Jack?" "You mean I get to spend the whole weekend with my little Jackie boo?" That was 100% yes. When Laurie came downstairs after her bath, I grabbed her. She let out a little yelp. "You haven't made plans for my birthday, have you?" "No, not yet. I was thinking of having everyone over for a BBQ, bouncy castle for the kids, bucking bronco for the big kids. How about we get away? Just the two of us. Go to the Hamptons and rent a romantic cottage on the beach." "How bourgeois," she chuckled. "Should we rent a garish Lamborghini too?" I laughed. "If you want. My folks have already said they'll have Jack for the weekend." My birthday came around on a Friday. That morning, Laurie drove Jack to my parents while I finished packing our weekend bags. Laurie has already specifically picked out some fancy dresses to show off to the douchebags who summer in the Hamptons. I think she was looking forward to seeing how the other half lived and making snide remarks behind their backs. I was also in charge of collecting our neon green Lamborghini, which got the whole neighborhood snooping as I pulled it into our driveway. After an hour or so, Laurie hadn't returned. I just assumed Mom and Dad were chewing her ears off, so I gave her a call. It went straight to voicemail, so I called my mom instead. "Is Laurie still with you?" I asked. "We kinda need to get on the road." "No, sweetheart, we haven't seen Laurie yet." My heart dropped. "She left over an hour ago." "Oh, maybe she stopped for gas or something." "For an hour?" "Don't snap at me, Glenn. There could be traffic. I'm sure she's fine." "You're right. I'm sorry. I'll keep trying her cell. Please let me know when she gets to you." My stomach was in knots as I hung up and tried Laurie's cell again. 3 hours of calls and texts later. Nothing. I kept checking local traffic news to see if there was congestion, or God forbid an accident. "Mom, I'm so worried," I said, calling her back. "Do you think I should call the police?" "Oh, sweetheart, I don't think they'd do anything after a few hours. Stay positive." My mind kept going to Charlie. It was my 27th birthday. After all, I dialed his cell. "Glenn," he answered. "Happy birthday." My brother. I could hear the rumblings of an engine in the background. "Is this a bad time?" I asked. "Are you driving?" "Oh no, it's the perfect time. I'm not driving, but hold on. I'll just put you onto the driver." After a few seconds, I heard her. "Glenn, we're okay. We're driving to..." It was Laurie, but she was cut off short. "Okay, that's enough." "What the fuck have you done?" "Charlie." I spat down the phone. "You bring my family back now." "Do you know how kind your wife is?" he said. "She saw me on the side of the road and stopped to give me a ride. Such a sweetie. She told me all about your little birthday getaway and, well, I had to insist on being there myself. I couldn't miss your 27th after all." My stomach was in knots. "Please, Charlie. Please bring them back to me." I think you should come here, he said. We'll be at the cottage in around 3 hours or so. I heard you have some wheels of your own. Sounds like you'll be traveling in style. Charlie, I pleaded. I'm sorry for everything. I'm sorry for your sister. I'm sorry for abandoning you. Please, just come back to me. Let's talk about it man to man. You'll either be there or not. But if not, I've got another little friend who would love to make acquaintances with Laurie and Jack. I heard a click. He has a gun. Glenn, said Laurie. I'm coming. Just don't hurt them. Charlie, please, I'm coming. Good. Oh, and no police and all that shit, of course. You know how it goes. See you later. Brother. He hung up. I inhaled a sharp breath and screamed into the house. The first thing I did was collect the handgun we kept on the top shelf of our bedroom closet. Then I went downstairs and spotted a handmade birthday card from Jack on the kitchen counter, with a cupcake next to it. You could see Laurie's influence in the words as she had guided his little hand with a paintbrush. Happy birthday to the best daddy in the world. I fought back the tears, shoved the delicious cupcake into my mouth, and got into that ugly-ass Lamborghini, putting my foot down and raising my middle finger at the neighborhood watch, who shook their fists at me. It took me 4 hours to reach the cottage in the Hamptons we'd rented on Airbnb. I put the gun down the front of my pants and walked inside, my heart ready to explode. I was greeted by the smell of rich tomato sauce. Laurie was sitting at a dining chair, her hands strapped to the sides with thick twine. Charlie was standing over the cooker, stirring a saucepan. I could see a playpen with Jack sitting up playing with toys, and baby Joseph was lying on his back, waving his arms around. I'm here, I said, making my presence known. Laurie went from looking terrified to mild relief. Oh, I heard that god-awful car pull up, said Charlie. Half the neighborhood probably did. You're just in time. I made pasta. Thanks and all, but I'm not hungry. I went straight over to Laurie. Are you hurt? She shook her head. No, honey, I'm fine. Jack's fine, too. I kissed her and went over to the playpen. Jack giggled when he saw me, holding up a plastic dinosaur. Joseph clung onto a plush toy of a blue dog. Don't they look so cute together? Said Charlie. Brothers from a different mother, just like us. I pulled the gun from my pants and turned to face Charlie. You're not the Charlie I called my best friend for years. You need help. This obsession has gone on long enough. Tell me, did you kill your wife? What? Said Laurie from the table. Charlie grinned. I forget how clever you are. You were always the brains, helping me with homework and stupid math tests that mean absolutely nothing. I loved you, Charlie, but this is too much. So I'm taking my wife, and I'm taking my son. I think under the circumstances we'll be taking Joseph, too. I sincerely hope you get the help you need so one day he can have a relationship with his dad. I walked over to Laurie, but she yelled out, "Wait!" Charlie started to laugh. Did you think it would be that easy? Just look inside her blouse. I peeked inside and saw an electronic device strapped to her chest. It had a numerical display that was counting down. There were 46 minutes remaining. If she moves from that spot before the timer runs out, a shot of adrenaline will be pumped into her heart. We're talking about an insane amount of adrenaline, enough to knock out an elephant. She simply won't make it. What do you want from me? I yelled. He walked towards me and took the gun from my hand, putting it on the table. Then he held up his scarred palm and held it against mine. That burning sensation came back. I want us to share a bottle, then live up to our pact. But I didn't make the pact. I screamed. You forced it on me. Come on, Glenn. We owe this to my sister and to Blake, to Basquiat, Winehouse, Morrison, Cobain, Joplin, to all those legends. You're insane, I said, pushing him against the wall. Careful, all it takes is one little click, and Laurie's heart goes boom, and little Jack and Joey will be left orphans. You're actually going to take your own life with your baby boy right there? He nodded. I've been committed to this since I was 14 years old. If you do exactly what I say, Laurie lives. She can take Jack and Joey and be the hero of the story. Now, I checked your birth certificate. You were born at 2119, which is when you'll officially turn 27. Laurie's heart device will become useless at 2130, at which point she can wriggle out of those ropes and get out of here. But not before we've taken a special concoction I've made to honor my sister. My legs went weak, and I had to sit down on the floor. You actually want me to end my life with you? Forever 27. Glenn, you'll thank me when we're living it up. Don't do it. Honey, said Laurie. Yeah, that's not an option, said Charlie. You see, if he refuses, I'll put a bullet in his head. Then I'll watch as your heart explodes. I started to cry. I felt so weak, so powerless. But I think the worst thing of all was that Charlie was my friend. We'd been estranged for years, but he was my friend. May I kiss my wife? I asked. Of course. I'm not a monster. I stood up and walked over to Laurie, gently hugging her. I could feel the metallic device against my chest as I kissed her. Don't do this, she said, tears streaming. I love you. Laurie, look after our boy. I went over to the playpen and picked up Jack, who looked so oblivious to everything. Dada, he said, gently patting my face. I love you, Jack, I said, kissing his cheek. He wiped his cheek like it was the most disgusting thing he'd experienced. Look after Mama. I reached down and stroked little Joseph's face. I wish things could have been different for you. Little one. All right, we get it, said Charlie. Outside. Now, despite the disturbing situation I found myself in, the night was beautiful. A dinner table had been set up on the deck behind the cottage. There was a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. The moon was low, the temperature mild, the sounds of the ocean gentle. It was supposed to be me and Laurie, enjoying a meal and maybe a spot of lovemaking on the dunes like we were teenagers again. Sit down, he said. I've waited weeks for this. I almost did it without you, but my scar burned like a motherfucker. Do you ever get that? I shrugged as I sat down. Yeah, you do. It's because we're connected. He poured 2 whiskeys and pushed one towards me. I didn't hesitate, downing it in one go, shuddering a little at the afterburn. That's good shit, I said. It's gotta be the best, he said. It's a 10-year-old single malt. I pushed out my glass for another, which he obliged. Suppose I'd better catch up. He downed it and checked his watch. 1:15. Now's as good a time as any. He pulled out a glass vial from his pocket containing a clear liquid. This is a highly concentrated mix of xyloplon, Valium, Klonopin, and ethanol. He opened it and poured half into my glass, and the other half into his. The beauty is we'll probably be asleep before any of the nasty side effects take hold. I took a deep breath and downed some whiskey straight from the bottle. Gimme that, he said, and did the same. He then pulled out his gun and placed it on the table. I could feel tears streaming down my face. You were my brother, Charlie, I said. How could you do this to me? Because I love you, he said. You and I, forever 27. I can't think of anything more beautiful than that. He looked at his watch again and beamed. 2119. It's officially your birthday. Glenn, welcome to 27. Oh, how I've waited for this. Please, Charlie, think of Jack. Think of Joseph. He needs his daddy. He picked up the gun. Drink it. I picked up the glass and swirled the clear mixture around. The smell was like pure alcohol. Then I looked to the sky, the moon, the stars, and the ocean. To Laurie and to Jack, I said, downing the mixture. It burned like freshly boiled water as it went down, making me clutch my throat. As soon as it reached my stomach, it was like a sucker punch to the gut. I stumbled off the chair and fell to the ground, clutching my belly. "I'm coming." "Brother," said Charlie, picking up his glass. But before he could take a sip, a gunshot sounded out. I heard the glass smash on the ground and had enough time to see a single trickle of blood drip down his forehead before he collapsed. Then I passed out. A week later, I was awake in a hospital bed. It turns out my wife is a genius. She figured out that if she could force something between her chest and the adrenaline shot, she'd be able to move freely. So, while Charlie and I were sitting outside, Laurie freed her hands. Charlie was no expert when it came to knots, apparently, and wedged a dinner plate against her chest. When the device activated, it shattered the plate, causing a small cut to her chest, but otherwise leaving her unharmed. She then used my gun, which Charlie had left on the table, to shoot him in the head. It wasn't a fatal shot, though just enough to render him unconscious. He was being kept on a different floor in the hospital. On the day of my release, I went to see him. He had tubes coming out of his arms, mouth, and thighs. Despite what he's put me through, it gave me no pleasure to see him that way. We've become temporary guardians to Joseph Morgan, Charlie's son, though we're fighting for custody. Charlie's parents, who are his next of kin, are really too old to be looking after a baby. We always said we wanted 2 kids, and he's as sweet as pie. Jack has taken a shine to him, too. Charlie remained on life support. There was always a police officer sitting outside his room, but I visited regularly. He could sometimes communicate with his hands and eyes. Speech was usually slurred, but I know in my heart he used every fiber of energy left in his body to communicate with me on one special day. The day before he turned 28. I was reading Of Mice and Men to him. It was a book we'd studied at school and had meant a lot to us at the time, having got us both B grades on our assignments. Mid-speech, I was interrupted by his hand on my wrist. He gripped it tighter than I thought he could. I looked into his eyes, my breath frozen. They were wide, pleading. There were already several birthday cards dotted around the room, reminding him of what was about to happen. Pluh. His lips parted to try and speak. I could see tears forming in his eyes. I put the book down and leaned closer. "Charlie, what is it?" "Glenn, you have to..." I knew what he wanted to say. "Charlie, please don't ask that of me." "Please," he said. "Forever 27. I looked around the room. It was empty, but the door was open. A cop was sitting outside like usual. I stood up and slowly closed the door. Wedging a chair under the handle, I went back to Charlie. "Are you sure?" I asked. He lifted a trembling hand to my face and nodded. "I'm sorry, brother." I started to cry as I kissed his cheek. Then I found the mains plug, pulling it out of the wall. I held his hand as he started to convulse, and alarms started sounding through the halls. The cop was knocking on the door, trying to force himself in. By the time the cop and 2 nurses had got into the room, Charlie was dead. His parents took me to court. I spent 6 months in prison before the judge dismissed the case. Charlie got his wish. He became a member of the 27 Club. I hope it's everything he wanted it to be. Story 2. The scream from the neighboring house. I had to go live alone in another state to attend college. I was lucky. My father helped me pay for the expenses of a house so I could focus on my studies. The house was wonderful, at least to me. It was a small house that consisted of a bedroom, kitchen, bathroom, living room, and my favorite part, a huge backyard where I liked to sit at night drinking tea while listening to an audiobook or some music to relax. But very strange things were happening, not in my house, but in the neighbor's house. It started on the first night I stayed there. Around 10 o'clock at night, I heard a scream of a girl from the neighbor's house. More than scaring me, I found it amusing. It wasn't a scream of pain or fear, just a girl screaming. So I imagined a girl throwing a tantrum or fighting with someone. But this scream happened every night without fail. I asked the other neighbors if they knew what it was about, but I always got different answers. Some believed it was a sound of the gate closing that sounded like a scream. Others thought the house was haunted. One of the neighbors told me that she had even called the police, worried about what might be happening to the girl. But the police, upon searching the house, saw that only a man in his 40s lived alone there. I learned to live with these screams. Supernatural or unexplainable things didn't scare me. After all, I had never experienced anything like it. Besides that, it was about 6 very quiet months, studying, listening to one or the other of those screams. But other than that, everything was normal. Things changed when I went on vacation. I didn't want to spend the holidays at my father's house, since I had to do some things in my own house, mow the lawn, buy some furniture, things that people who live alone do. However, with the holidays came boredom. The city where I lived was small. It didn't have a mall or any activities to do, so I started to obsess over the scream from the neighboring house. I began to observe the neighbor's routine, to see what time he left and returned home. I noticed that every day he left at sunset and only came back at dawn. I attributed this to some night job he might have, so I started to prepare my plan. I bought a tall ladder to jump over the wall and a mini scythe to defend myself, in case the neighbor came back and turned out to be dangerous. I was also prepared in case the police showed up. I was going to say it was because of the screams I heard, and I wanted to see if everything was okay, but I wasn't too worried. I had a good lawyer, and I would enter and leave without anyone noticing. Then the awaited night arrived. The man left his house at the same time, got into his car, and drove away. I waited about 30 minutes to make sure he wouldn't come back because he had forgotten something, and I grabbed the scythe and the ladder. I put the ladder on the wall, climbed it holding the scythe, sat on the wall, balanced the scythe on the wall, and passed the ladder to the other side, so that I could climb it when I returned. The house was very well reinforced. In addition to the high walls, bars on all windows made me wonder how the hell I was going to get into the house, since I didn't have any skill in picking locks. However, to my surprise, the front door was unlocked. Who would be so stupid to have so much security and leave the door unlocked? I sarcastically asked as I entered the living room. The house was normal, furnished, but it seemed abandoned. Everything was covered in dust, as if no one who lived there used anything. I started walking through the house. Everything was extremely quiet, a tranquility that gave me chills, until it happened. The strange scream that happened every night made me alert, in fight or flight mode. I held the scythe tightly and headed to where the scream had come from. I went to the kitchen, where I saw there was a door to a basement. I tried to turn on the lights, but they didn't work, so I turned on the flashlight on my cell phone, trying to relieve the fear I was feeling. I tried to make jokes in my head, as if I were some special agent entering an investigation. As I descended, I realized that the basement was clean. It was the only part of the house without any dust. It was very strange for him to clean the basement and leave the rest of the house in that state. There was a sofa, a freezer, and a stove. But that's when it happened. I heard a strange noise coming from the ceiling. As I raised the flashlight, there she was. A girl of at least 10 years old, holding onto the corner of the ceiling in a completely inhuman position. Her eyes were as black as darkness, reflecting the flashlight with an unnatural glow. Her body was twisted in an impossible way, as if all her bones had been broken and reassembled incorrectly. She had a macabre smile, a smile that seemed more like a slit open in the darkness of her face. I froze. She moved slowly, descending the wall like a spider. Every movement made a horrible sound, like bones breaking and rearranging. Her gaze fixed on me, a gaze that pierced my soul with terrifying intensity. My muscles tensed. My heart pounded uncontrollably in my chest. Suddenly, the girl let out a sharp and inhuman scream and started running towards me at a frightening speed. I dropped the scythe and ran for the ladder, but she was faster. I felt her presence right behind me. I felt her cold and fetid breath on my neck. I ran through the living room trying to find the exit, but she caught up with me, jumping on top of me and knocking me down. She started scratching and biting me with tremendous force, her mouth opening in an impossible way, as if she were going to swallow my whole head. I screamed and fought to free myself, but she was relentless. Her nails sank into my flesh. Her bites tore my skin. Desperation took over me. I thought I was going to die there, devoured by that horrible creature. That's when the front door burst open with a bang. The neighbor rushed in and yelled at the girl to stop. She stopped suddenly, still on top of me, and looked at him with a confused expression. He said calmly, "Sweetheart, please let him go. He didn't mean to disturb you, and even though he entered uninvited, he didn't mean to harm you." The girl looked at me with completely dark eyes, as if she had no soul. The neighbor said again, "Come on, go down to your room. I'll take the boy back to his house and come back to prepare something for you to eat." The girl got off me and started to retreat to the basement, without taking her eyes off both of us. The man helped me up and took me out of that house, taking me back to mine. When we got to my house, he slapped me in the face and asked, "What the hell were you doing in my house? Were you trying to steal something?" "No," I said, still extremely nervous. I was just trying to figure out what was causing the screams every night. I was worried that something might be happening to that girl. But what the hell was that thing? "What did you do to her?" My neighbor sat on the couch and sighed. "I don't know who she is," he said, lighting a cigarette. Usually, I would be very bothered by someone smoking in my house, but I was afraid to stop him. He seemed to really need that cigarette. I own several properties. I survived by renting all of them out. When I came to inspect this one next door, I found that girl in the basement. She tried to attack me, biting and scratching like she did with you. But then, she stopped and sniffed me, like a dog trying to recognize its mother. She stopped and climbed back to the corner of the wall. Scared, I left the house and called the police, but she was no longer there, thanks to her ability to move in unnatural ways. She hides from others she finds dangerous. So, I left the basement ready for her. Every day I come to be with her and give her meat. She only feeds on raw meat and spends the whole day stalking me. "How did you find me?" I asked. "I forgot to lock the door, but the house has a silent alarm. I knew you had entered as soon as the door opened." "Is there a chance that thing will come after me?" I asked, frightened. "I don't believe so. She usually never leaves the house, never followed me wherever I go, only follows me if I don't come back the next day." The man finished smoking his cigarette and prepared to leave. "I'll let it pass this time, but don't ever enter my house again," he said, heading for the exit. "And don't try to waste your time telling others what you saw. No one will believe you. I've tried." Since then, I try to spend as much time as possible away from that house. I can't leave because of the contract, and my father isn't that rich. So I stay at my college friends' houses and spend the holidays at my father's house. I never again doubted the strange things that happen in the world. The memory of that horrible creature still haunts me, and I can hardly believe I survived that terrifying encounter. Now, whenever I hear a strange noise at night, I cower in fear, wondering if she's nearby, waiting to devour me. But, despite everything, one thing is certain: I will never dare to enter that neighbor's house again. That place is full of dark secrets and unimaginable horrors, and I don't want to risk becoming another victim of that terrible creature. Story 3. Dad and I haunted down the dogman that killed my sister. I've always hated the smell of gun oil. It clings to everything it touches, soaking deep into the fibers of my clothes, the lining of my backpack, the coarse hair on the back of my hands. Yet here I am, kneeling on the cracked linoleum of our mudroom, a Remington, 308 laid across my thighs, and the stench of gun oil sharp in my nostrils. The early morning light barely scratches at the edges of the blinds, dim and grey like the belly of a dead fish. My dad Frank is in the kitchen, clattering around with the coffee pot and mumbling under his breath. Today we're heading up to the woods of northern Michigan, same as we did every year before Leah, before we lost her. I can't help but feel the old scars throbbing as I load bullets into the magazine. It's been 10 years since that hunting trip, the one that tore my family into before and after. Before, when Leah's laughter was a constant soundtrack to our lives. After, when every silence was filled with her absence. We were just kids back then. I was 10, Leah was 8. It was supposed to be a typical hunting trip, one of those bonding experiences Dad was always talking about. But things went wrong. We got separated from Dad somehow. One minute we were following him, the next we were lost, the dense woods closing in around us. Dad says when he found me, I was huddled under a fallen tree, my eyes wide, my body frozen. All I could mutter through chattering teeth was, "Dogman." It was only later, after the search parties had combed through every thicket and hollow, that they found her. What remained of Leah was barely recognizable, the evidence of a brutal mauling undeniable. The authorities concluded it was likely a bear attack. But Dad, he never accepted that explanation. He had seen the tracks, too large and oddly shaped for any bear. As I load another round, the memory flashes, unbidden and unwelcome. Large, hairy clawed hands reaching out towards us, impossibly big, grotesque in their form. Yet, the rest of the creature eludes me, a shadow just beyond the edge of my recall, leaving me with nothing but fragmented terrors and Leah's haunting, echoing screams. My mind blocked most of it out. A self-defense mechanism, I guess. For years after that day, sleep was a battleground. I'd wake up in strange places, kitchen floor, backyard, even at the edge of the nearby creek. My therapist said it was my mind's way of trying to resolve the unresolved, to wander back through the woods searching for Leah. But all I found in those sleepless nights was a deeper sense of loss. It took time, a lot of therapy, and patience I didn't know I had. But the sleepwalking did eventually stop. I guess I started to find some semblance of peace. I have mostly moved on with my life. The fragmentary memories of that day are still there, lurking in the corners of my mind. But they don't dominate my thoughts like they used to. I just finished my sophomore year at Michigan State, majoring in environmental science. As for Dad, the loss of Leah broke him. He became a shell of himself. It destroyed his marriage with Mom. He blamed himself for letting us out of his sight, for not protecting Leah. His life took on a single, consuming focus, finding the creature that killed her. He read every book, every article on cryptids and unexplained phenomena. He mapped sightings, connected dots across blurry photos and shaky testimonies of the dogman. But as the 10th anniversary of Leah's death approaches, Dad's obsession has grown more intense. He started staying up late, poring over his maps and notes, muttering to himself about patterns and cycles. He's convinced that the dogman reappears every 10 years, and this is our window of opportunity to finally hunt it down. I'm not nearly as convinced. The whole dogman thing seems like a coping mechanism, a way for Dad to channel his guilt and grief into something tangible, something he can fight against. But I decided to tag along on this trip, partly to keep an eye on him, partly because a small part of me hopes that maybe, just maybe, we'll find some kind of closure out there in the woods. I finished loading the rifle and set it aside, standing up to stretch my legs. I wiped my greasy hands on an old rag, trying to get rid of the smell. The early morning light is starting to seep into the room, casting long shadows across the floor. Dad comes out of the kitchen with 2 thermoses of coffee in hand. His eyes are bleary and tired. "You ready, Ryan?" he asks, handing me a thermos, his voice rough from too many sleepless nights. "Yeah, I'm ready," I reply, trying to sound more confident than I felt. We load our gear into the truck, the weight of our supplies and weapons a physical reminder of the burden we carry. The drive from Lansing across the Lower Peninsula is long and quiet, the silence between us filled with unspoken memories and unresolved grief. The drive north is a blur of highway lines and the dull hum of the engine. I drift off, the landscape outside blending into a haze. In my sleep, fragments of that day with Leah replay like scattered pieces of a puzzle. I see her smile, the way she tugged at my sleeve, eager to explore. The sunlight filters through the trees in sharp, jagged streaks. Then, the memory shifts, darker, disjointed. Leah's voice echoes, a playful laugh turning into a scream that pierces the air. The crunch of leaves underfoot as something heavy moves through the underbrush. I see a shadow, large and looming, not quite fitting the shapes of any creature I know. Then, something darker creeps into the dream, something I've never allowed myself to remember clearly. Before I can see what it is, I wake up with a start as the truck jerks slightly on a rough patch of road. Dad glances over. "Bad dream?" he asks. I nod, rubbing the sleep from my eyes, the remnants of the dream clinging to me like the cold. "Yeah, just thinking about Leah," I manage to say. As we drive, Dad attempts to bridge the silence with small talk. He asks about my finals, my plans for the summer, anything to keep the conversation going. His voice carries a forced cheerfulness, but it's clear his heart isn't in it. I respond when necessary. My answer's brief, my gaze fixed on the passing scenery. The landscape changes as we head further north, from flat expanses to rolling hills dotted with dense patches of forest. It's beautiful country, the kind that reminds you how vast and wild Michigan can be. But today it just feels oppressive, like it's closing in on us. We finally arrive at the cabin, nestled deep in the woods, its weathered wood blending seamlessly with the surrounding trees. The place hasn't changed much since the last time I was here, a relic from another time, filled with the echoes of our past. I can still see Leah running around the porch, her laughter ringing out into the forest. Dad parks the truck, and we step out into the crisp air. The smell of pine and damp earth fills my nostrils. We start unloading our gear, the tension between us palpable. "Let's get this inside," Dad says, his voice gruff as he hefts a duffel bag onto his shoulder. I nod, grabbing my own bag and following him to the cabin. Inside, it's a mix of old and new, the same rustic furniture, but with new hunting gear and maps strewn across the table. Dad's obsession is evident in every corner of the room, a constant reminder of why we're here. As we unpack, we exchange strained attempts at normalcy. He talks about the latest cryptid sightings he's read about, his eyes lighting up with a fervor that both worries and saddens me. "Did you hear about the sighting up near Alpena?" he asks, laying out his maps on the table. "Yeah, you mentioned it," I reply, trying to muster some enthusiasm. "Do you really think there's something to it?" Dad's eyes meet mine, and for a moment, I see a flicker of doubt, but it's quickly replaced by grim determination. I have to believe it. Ryan, it's the only thing that makes sense. We finish unpacking, the silence between us growing heavier with each passing minute. I step outside to clear my head, the cool air a welcome relief. The sun is starting to set, casting long shadows across the clearing. I can't shake the feeling of unease. "You can take the upstairs room," Dad mutters. His voice is strained, trying to sound normal, but it's clear the weight of the past is heavy on him. I nod, hauling my backpack up the creaking stairs to the small bedroom that I used to share with Leah. The room feels smaller now, or maybe I've just grown too much since those innocent days. I unpack silently, setting my things aside. The bed is stiff and cold under my touch. As I settle in, I can't help but glance at the corner where Leah and I would huddle together, whispering secrets and making plans for adventures that would never happen. I push the thoughts away, focusing on the practicalities of unpacking. After settling in, I go back downstairs to find Dad loading up a backpack with supplies for our hunt. The intensity in his eyes is palpable, his hands moving with practiced precision. I know this routine. It's one he's perfected over countless solo trips since that fateful day. "We'll head out early," he says, not looking up from his task. "Gotta make the most of the daylight." I nod, though unease curls in my stomach. I'm not just worried about what we might find or not find out there. I'm worried about him. Each year, the obsession seems to carve him out a bit more, leaving less of the Dad I knew. The morning air is sharp with the scent of pine and wet earth as Dad and I head into the deeper parts of the forest. The terrain is rugged, familiar in its untamed beauty, but there's a tension between us that makes the landscape feel alien. Dad moves with a purposeful stride, his eyes scanning the woods around us. Every snap of a twig, every rustle in the underbrush seems to draw his attention. He's on edge, and it puts me on edge too. As we walk, my mind drifts back to that day 10 years ago. I can almost hear Leah's voice echoing through the trees, her high-pitched call as she darted ahead. Catch me. Ryan! I remember how the sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting dancing shadows on the ground. Those memories are so vivid, so tangible. It feels like I could just turn a corner and see her there, waiting for us. Dad suddenly stops and kneels, examining the ground. He points out a set of tracks that are too large for a deer, with an unusual gait pattern. It's been here, Rye. I'm telling you, it's close, he whispers, a mixture of excitement and something darker in his voice. I nod, though I'm not sure what to believe. Part of me wants to dismiss it all as grief-fueled obsession. But another part, the part that heard Leah's scream and saw something monstrous in the woods that day, isn't so sure. As we continue, Dad's comments become increasingly cryptic. You know, they say the dogman moves in cycles, drawn to certain places, certain times, like it's tied to the land itself. He muses, more to himself than to me. His fixation on the creature has always been intense, but now it borders on mania. We set up a makeshift blind near a clearing where Dad insists the creature will pass. Hours drag by with little to see but the occasional bird or distant deer. The sun rises higher in the sky, casting long, slender shadows through the dense canopy. I shift uncomfortably in my spot, the forest floor hard and unyielding beneath me. My eyes dart between the trees, hoping to catch a glimpse of something, anything, to break the monotony. Dad, on the other hand, remains steadfast, his gaze fixed on the tree line as if he can will the dogman into existence by sheer force of will. A bird chirps nearby, startling me. I sigh and adjust my grip on the rifle. I glance over at Dad. Anything? I ask, more out of boredom than genuine curiosity. Not yet, he replies, his voice tight. But it's out there. I know it. I nod, even though I'm not sure I believe him. The forest seems too quiet, too still. Maybe we're chasing ghosts. As the sun begins its descent, the forest is bathed in a warm, golden light. The air cools, and a breeze rustles the leaves. I shiver, more from anticipation than the cold. The long hours of sitting and waiting are starting to wear on me. Let's call it a day for now, Dad says finally, his voice heavy with disappointment. We'll head back to the cabin, get some rest, and try again tomorrow. I stand and stretch, feeling the stiffness in my muscles. We pack up our gear in silence and start the trek back to the cabin. The walk is long and quiet. The only sounds are the crunch of leaves underfoot and the distant calls of birds settling in for the night. Dinner is a quiet affair, both of us lost in our thoughts. I try to make small talk, asking Dad about his plans for tomorrow, but it feels forced. We clean up in silence. After dinner, I retreat to the small bedroom. The fatigue from the day's hike has settled into my bones, but sleep still feels like a distant hope. I lie down, staring at the ceiling, the room cloaked in darkness, save for the sliver of moonlight creeping through the window. Downstairs, I hear the faint sound of Dad moving around, likely unable to sleep himself. I drift into sleep, but it's not restful. My dreams pull me back to that fateful day in the woods. Leah's voice is clear and vibrant, her laughter echoing through the trees. She looks just as she did then, bright-eyed and full of life, her blonde hair catching the sunlight as she runs ahead of me. Come on. Right. You can't catch me, she taunts, her voice playful and teasing. I chase after her, but the scene shifts abruptly. The sky darkens, the woods around us growing dense and foreboding. Leah's laughter fades, replaced by a chilling silence. I see her ahead, standing still, her back to me. Leah? I call out, my voice trembling. She turns slowly, her eyes wide and filled with fear. "Ryan, you have to remember," she says, her voice barely a whisper. "It wasn't what you think. You need to know the truth." Leah's words hang in the air, cryptic and unsettling. Before I can respond, she turns and starts running again, her figure becoming a blur among the trees. Panic rises in my chest as I sprint after her, my feet pounding against the forest floor. "Leah, wait!" I shout, desperation lacing my voice. The forest around me seems to close in, the trees towering and twisted, shadows dancing menacingly in the dim light. I push forward, trying to keep her in sight, but she's too fast, slipping away like a wisp of smoke. Suddenly, there's a rustle, a flash of movement in the corner of my vision. Leah screams, a sound that pierces through the heavy silence. It happens too quickly. I can't see what it is, only a dark blur that snatches her up. "Leah!" I scream, my voice breaking. I stumble, falling to my knees as the forest spins around me. My heart races, and the terror is so real, so visceral, that it pulls me back to that awful day, the one that changed everything. I jolt awake, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I sit up, wiping the cold sweat from my forehead as I try to steady my breathing. The room is still dark. The shadows cast by the moonlight seem to flicker and dance on the walls. My heart is still racing from the nightmare, the echo of Leah's scream lingering in my ears. As I struggle to calm down, the floorboards outside my room creak. The door opens slowly, and I see the silhouette of my dad in the doorway, a Bowie knife in his hand, his posture tense. "Dad, what the hell are you doing?" I whisper, my voice shaking. "Shh," he hisses, holding up a hand to silence me. "I heard something moving around in the cabin. Stay quiet." I swallow hard, my mouth dry. I glance at the clock on the nightstand. It's just past 3 in the morning. The cabin is silent, the kind of deep, oppressive silence that makes every small sound seem louder. I can't hear anything out of the ordinary, but Dad's expression is deadly serious. He motions for me to get up, and I do, moving as quietly as I can. My heart is racing, a mix of lingering fear from the dream and the sudden, sharp anxiety of the present moment. Dad leads the way, stepping cautiously out of the bedroom and into the hallway, the knife held ready in front of him. We move through the cabin, checking each room in turn. The living room is empty, the furniture casting long shadows in the dim moonlight. The kitchen is just as we left it, the plates from dinner still drying on the counter. Everything seems normal, untouched. We finish our sweep of the cabin without finding anything amiss. The silence is heavy, punctuated only by our soft footfalls. I can see the tension in Dad's frame, his grip on the knife unwavering. After checking the last room, we pause in the dimly lit hallway, the air thick with unspoken questions. "There's nothing here," I say, my voice low. "Are you sure you heard something?" He looks at me, his eyes searching for something in my face. I heard growling, deep and close. It was right outside the window. Maybe it was just an animal outside, a raccoon or something, I suggest, although the certainty in his voice makes me doubt my own reassurance. "No, it wasn't like that. It was different," he insists, his voice tense. I nod, not wanting to argue, but the seeds of worry are planted deep. The look in his eyes sends a chill down my spine. It's not just fear, it's desperation. The kind of desperation that comes from years of chasing shadows and finding nothing. I can see the toll this hunt has taken on him, the way it's worn him down, turned him into a man I barely recognize. We head back to our rooms. As I lie down, my mind races with thoughts of my dad. I can't help but wonder if he's losing it, if the years of grief and guilt have finally pushed him over the edge. Dad wasn't always like this. Before Leah's death, he was the kind of father who took us fishing, helped with homework, and told terrible jokes that made us groan and laugh at the same time. He was solid, dependable, but losing Leah changed him. The guilt twisted him into someone I barely recognize, someone driven by a need for answers, for closure that may never come. I try to sleep, but my thoughts keep me awake. I can hear Dad moving around downstairs, probably pacing or double-checking the locks. His paranoia has become a constant presence, and I don't know how to help him. I don't even know if I can help him. The next morning, the sunlight filters weakly through the cabin windows, casting a pale light that does little to lift the heavy mood. I drag myself out of bed, feeling the exhaustion of another restless night. Dad is already up, hunched over his maps at the kitchen table, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. Morning, I mumble, rubbing the sleep from my eyes as I pour myself a cup of coffee. Did you sleep at all? He shakes his head, not looking up from his notes. Not much. I couldn't stop thinking about what I heard last night. I sip my coffee, trying to shake off the remnants of my nightmare. Maybe it was just an animal. Dad, we're deep in the woods, after all. He finally looks up, his eyes intense. Ryan, I know what I heard. It wasn't just an animal. It was something else. I sigh, not wanting to argue. Okay, fine. Dad, what's the plan for today? We're going back out. I found some tracks yesterday, and I want to follow them, see where they lead. I nod, feeling a mix of apprehension and resignation. I can see how much this means to him, how desperate he is for any kind of lead. All right, let's get packed and head out. We spend the morning preparing, loading up our gear and double-checking our supplies. Dad is meticulous, going over everything with a fine-toothed comb. I try to match his focus, but my mind keeps drifting back to Leah and the dream I had. Her words echo in my head, cryptic and unsettling. You need to know the truth. We set off into the woods, the air crisp and cool. The forest is alive with the sounds of birds and rustling leaves, but it all feels distant, like background noise to the tension between us. Dad leads the way, his eyes scanning the ground for any sign of the tracks he found yesterday. As we walk, I can't help but notice how erratically he's acting. He mutters to himself, his eyes darting around as if expecting something to jump out at us. His grip on his rifle is tight, his knuckles white. Dad, are you okay? I ask, trying to keep my voice steady. He glances at me, his expression unreadable. I'm fine, just focused. He stops frequently to examine the ground or the bark of trees, pointing out marks and signs that seem meaningless to me. Look at this, he says, crouching down to examine a broken branch. See how it snapped? That's not a deer or a bear. That's something bigger, stronger. I crouch next to Dad, squinting at the broken branch. To me, it just looks like a regular broken branch, the kind you see all over the forest. I don't know, Dad. It just looks like a branch to me, I say, trying to keep my voice neutral. Dad's eyes flicker with frustration. You're not looking close enough. It's the way it's snapped. Too clean, too deliberate. Something did this. I nod, not wanting to argue. Okay, sure. But even if you're right, it could be anything. A storm, another hunter. His expression hardens. I know what I'm looking for. This is different. I sigh, feeling the weight of the past and the tension between us pressing down on me. Dad, I had a dream last night about Leah. The words hang in the air between us, heavy and fraught with unspoken emotions. Dad's eyes widen and he straightens up, his entire demeanor shifting. What kind of dream? What did you see? His voice is urgent, almost desperate. It was strange. We were in the woods, like we are now, but everything felt different. Leah was there, running ahead of me, laughing. Then she stopped and told me I needed to know the truth, that it wasn't what I thought. Dad grabs my shoulders, his grip tight. What else did she say? Did she tell you anything specific? Anything about the creature? I shake my head, feeling a chill run down my spine. No, that was it. She just said I needed to know the truth, and then she was gone. Dad's grip on my shoulders tightens and his eyes bore into mine with a mixture of desperation and hope. Ryan, you have to try to remember. Think hard. What did the creature look like? Did you see anything else? I pull back slightly, uneasy with his intensity. Dad, I told you. I don't remember. It was just a dream. A nightmare, really. My mind's probably just mixing things up. He lets go of me and runs a hand through his hair, looking frustrated and lost. Dreams can be important. They can hold memories we've buried deep. Please, try to remember. This could be a sign, a clue. I rub my temples, feeling the beginnings of a headache. I've tried, okay? I've tried for years to piece together what happened that day, but it's all just fragments, like pieces of a puzzle that don't fit. The dream. It felt real, but I don't think it's telling me anything new. Dad's face falls, and he looks older than I've ever seen him. He turns away, staring into the forest, as if it holds all the answers. As we make our way back to the cabin, the sun begins to set, casting long shadows through the trees. The air grows colder, and I shiver, pulling my jacket tighter around me. Dad is silent, lost in his thoughts, his face drawn and haggard. Back at the cabin, we unload our gear once again in silence. Dad disappears into his room, muttering something about going over his notes. I decide to explore the cabin, hoping to find something that might help me understand what's going on with him. In the attic, I find a box of old family photos and documents. As I sift through the contents, I come across a worn journal with Dad's handwriting on the cover. Curiosity gets the better of me, and I open it, flipping through the pages. The journal is filled with notes and sketches, detailing his obsession with the dogman. But there's something else. Entries that talk about Leah, about that day in the woods. His handwriting becomes more erratic, the words harder to read. One entry stands out, dated just a few days after Leah's death. June 15th, 2013. It was supposed to be a normal trip. Keep them close, Frank, I kept telling myself. But I failed. Leah is gone, and it's my fault. I heard her scream, saw the shadows. I tried to get to her, but the thing, it was there, too fast, too strong. My hands, blood everywhere. No one will believe me. I can't even believe myself. I have to find it. I have to protect Ryan. I have to make it right. God, what have I done? Before I can read further, the attic door creaks open and Dad's voice slices through the stillness. What are you doing up here? His tone is sharp, almost panicked. I turn to see him standing in the doorway, his face pale and his eyes wide with something between anger and fear. I clutch the journal to my chest, my mind racing. I found this. I was just trying to understand. In an instant, he crosses the room and snatches the journal from my hands. His grip is tight, his knuckles white. You had no right, he growls, his voice trembling. Dad, I just wanted to know the truth, I shout, frustration boiling over. What really happened to Leah? His eyes flash with a mix of rage and anguish, and before I can react, he slaps me across the face. The force of it knocks me off balance and I stumble backward, my cheek stinging. For a moment, there's a stunned silence. We both stand there, breathing hard, the air thick with tension. I'm sorry, Dad says finally, his voice barely a whisper. I didn't mean to. He trails off, clutching the journal to his chest like a lifeline. I touch my cheek, feeling the heat from the slap, and take a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Dad, what aren't you telling me? What really happened that day? Stay out of it, Ryan, Dad growls, his eyes dark with anger. You don't know what you're messing with. He turns and storms out of the attic. I'm left standing there, my cheek throbbing, my mind racing. What the fuck is going on? What really happened to Leah? And what is Dad so afraid of? That night, I sleep with my rifle within arm's reach, more afraid of my dad than any dogman. The slap still burns on my cheek, and the look in his eyes, rage, fear, something darker, haunts me. I lie awake, listening to the creaks and groans of the old cabin, every sound amplified in the stillness. Eventually, exhaustion pulls me under, and I fall into a restless sleep. The dream returns, vivid and unsettling. I'm back in the woods, chasing after Leah. Her laughter echoes through the trees, a haunting reminder of happier times. This time, though, I push myself harder, refusing to let her slip away. "Ryan, catch me," she calls, her voice playful. "I'm coming, Leah," I shout, my legs pumping, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The forest around us is a twisted, shadowy maze, the trees seeming to close in on us. Leah's figure becomes clearer, her blonde hair catching the dim light filtering through the canopy. She stops suddenly, turning to face me, her eyes wide with fear. "Leah, what is it?" I ask, my voice trembling. "Look behind you," she whispers, her voice barely audible. I turn slowly, dread creeping up my spine. In the shadows, I see a figure, its form indistinct and shifting. It's not quite animal, not quite human, something in between. The sight of it sends a jolt of terror through me, and I wake up with a start, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I'm not in my bed. The ground beneath me is cold and hard, the smell of damp earth filling my nostrils. Panic rises as I realize I've sleepwalked into the woods. I scramble to my feet, my eyes adjusting to the dim light. The moon casts a pale glow over the surroundings, revealing what looks like a long-abandoned animal lair. The walls are covered in giant claw marks, deep gouges in the wood and earth. The air is heavy with the scent of decay, and a chill runs through me. I can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched. Carefully, I start to move, my eyes scanning the ground, desperate for a familiar landmark. That's when I see them, faded scraps of fabric caught on the jagged edges of the underbrush. My steps falter, a sense of dread washing over me as I bend down to examine them. The fabric is torn, weathered by time and the elements, but unmistakably familiar. It's part of Leah's jacket, the bright pink one she wore on the day she disappeared. As I strain to make sense of it all, a rustling sound behind me snaps my focus. My heart leaps into my throat. I spin around, my hand instinctively reaching for the rifle I don't have, because of course, I didn't bring it in my unconscious state. The shadowy figure that emerges from the trees is unsettlingly familiar, mirroring the menacing forms of my nightmares. But as it steps into the moonlight, I recognize the worn jacket, the weary posture. It's Dad. "Ryan!" he calls out, his voice a mix of relief and stern concern. "I've been looking everywhere for you. What the hell are you doing out here?" I exhale slowly, the terror ebbing away as reality sets back in. I don't know, Dad. I must have sleepwalked again." My voice is shaky, my earlier dream still clinging to the edges of my consciousness. Dad stares at me in disbelief. "You haven't sleepwalked since you were a kid, Rye. This isn't just a coincidence." Dad stares at me in disbelief. "You haven't sleepwalked since you were a kid, Rye. This isn't just a coincidence." His eyes dart around, taking in the surroundings, the eerie, claw-marked den, the unsettling quiet of the woods. "How did you even find this place?" I shake my head, struggling to find an answer. "I don't know, Dad. I woke up here." The uncertainty in my voice does nothing to ease the tension. His eyes lock onto the tattered remains of Leah's jacket in my hands, and something inside him snaps. The color drains from his face as he stumbles a few steps backward. This is where it happened," he murmurs, his voice barely a whisper. "This is where we found Leah." "I thought you said you don't remember anything from that night," he says accusingly. "I swear, Dad, I don't know anything about this place." I insist, my own heart pounding. "It was you, wasn't it? You've been hiding this from me." His voice is frantic. "You, last night, the growling, it was you." His voice rises, tinged with hysteria. I step back, my pulse racing, feeling the chill of the night and the weight of his accusation. "Dad, I don't know what you're talking about." "No," he interrupts, his voice breaking as he points a trembling finger at me. "You knew. You always knew. It was you, Ryan. All these years. The evidence was right there, but I refused to see it. You were the dogman."
"You killed Leah!"
His words hit me like a physical blow, absurd and horrifying in their implications. "Dad, you're not making any sense. You're talking crazy." "I was just a little kid. How could I protest, my voice shaky. He steps closer, his presence looming over me, the outline of his figure distorted by the shadows of the trees. "Think about it. It all makes sense now. You led us here, to this place, because you remember, because you did it. Dad, stop it," I shout, my heart pounding in my chest. "You're scaring me. You need help. Professional help. This isn't you." But he's beyond reason, his eyes wild with a haunted grief. "I have to end this," he mutters, more to himself than to me, his hand tightening around his rifle. His finger hovers dangerously over the trigger of his rifle. My instincts kick in, and I know I have to act fast. I lunge toward him, trying to knock the weapon away, but he's quicker than I expected. We struggle, our breaths heavy in the cold night air, the sounds of our scuffle the only noise in the otherwise silent woods. His strength surprises me, fueled by his frantic emotions. He shoves me back, and I stumble over a root, my balance lost for a crucial second. That's all he needs. He raises his rifle, his intentions clear in his wild, pained eyes. I dive to the ground just as the shot rings out, a deafening blast that echoes ominously through the trees. The bullet whizzes past, narrowly missing me, embedding itself in the bark of an old pine. I scramble to my feet, my heart pounding in my ears, and I start running. The underbrush claws at my clothes and skin, but I push through, driven by a primal urge to survive. "Dad, stop. It's me. Ryan!" I shout back as I dodge between the trees. Another shot breaks the silence, closer this time, sending splinters of wood flying from a nearby tree trunk. It's surreal, being hunted by my own father, a man tormented by grief and lost in his delusions. I don't stop to look back. I can hear him crashing through the forest behind me, his heavy breaths and muttered curses carried on the wind. The terrain is rough, and I'm fueled by adrenaline, but exhaustion is setting in. I need a plan. Ahead, I see a rocky outcrop and make a split-second decision to head for it. It offers a chance to hide, to catch my breath and maybe reason with him if he catches up. As I reach the rocks, I slip behind the largest one, my body pressed tight against the cold, damp surface. I hear his footsteps approaching, slow and cautious now. As I press against the rock, trying to calm my racing heart, I can hear Dad's footsteps drawing closer, each step crunching ominously on the forest floor. He's methodical, deliberate, like a hunter stalking his prey. "Come out." "Ryan!" Dad's voice is ragged, filled with a blend of fury and pain. My heart pounds against my chest, the cold sweat on my back making me shiver against the rough surface of the rock. I know I can't just sit here. It's only a matter of time before he finds me. Taking a deep breath, I peek around the edge of the rock, trying to gauge his position. I see him, rifle raised, scanning the area slowly. This might be my only chance to end this madness without further violence. I need to disarm him, to talk some sense into him if I can, as quietly as I can. I move out from behind the rock, my steps careful to avoid any twigs or leaves that might betray my position. I'm almost upon him when a branch snaps under my foot, a sound so trivial yet so alarmingly loud in the quiet of the woods. Dad whirls around, looking completely unhinged. "Ryan!" he exclaims, his rifle swinging in my direction. Panic overtakes me, and I lunge forward, my hands reaching for the gun. We struggle, the rifle between us, our breaths heavy and erratic. "Dad, please, stop," I plead, trying to wrestle the gun away, but he's strong, stronger than I expected. In the chaos, the rifle goes off, The sound is deafening, a sharp echo that seems to reverberate off every tree around us. Pain explodes in my abdomen, sharp and burning, like nothing I've ever felt before. I stagger back, my hands instinctively going to the wound. The warmth of my own blood coats my fingers, stark and terrifying. Dad drops the rifle, his eyes wide with horror.
Oh my God.
"What have I done?" he gasps, rushing to my side as I collapse onto the forest floor. As the pain sears through me, a strange, overpowering energy surges within. It's wild, primal, unlike anything I've ever experienced. Looking down in horror, my hands are no longer hands but large, hairy, clawed appendages. The transformation is rapid, consuming. My vision blurs, senses heighten, and a raw, guttural growl builds in my throat. In that moment, a flood of understanding washes over me, mingling with the horror of realization. These are the hands of the creature from my nightmares. The creature whose face I can never fully recall because, as I now understand, it is me. What happens next feels detached, as if I'm no longer in control of my own actions, watching from a distance as my body moves on its own. I turn towards my dad, his face a mask of terror. He stumbles back, his eyes wide with the dawning realization of what his son has become. The forest around us seems to fall silent, holding its breath as the nightmarish scene unfolds. I can hear my own growls, guttural and deep, filling the air with a sound that's both foreign and intimately familiar. The pain in my abdomen fuels a dark, violent urge, an urge that's too strong to resist. With a ferocity that feels both alien and intrinsic, I move towards him, my dad, paralyzed by fear and shock. Doesn't run. Maybe he can't. Maybe he doesn't want to. The encounter is brutal and swift, a blur of motion and violence. My dad barely puts up a struggle, as though resigned to his fate. Not that there is anything he can do. The creature that I've become is too powerful, too consumed by the wild instincts surging through me. I tear him apart, limb from bloody limb. My hands, no, my claws, rending through fabric and flesh with disgusting ease. The sound of my dad's screams, of tearing fabric and flesh, is drowned out by the animalistic growls that echo through the trees. When it's all over, the red mist that had clouded my vision begins to fade, and the fierce, uncontrollable rage that drove my actions subsides. I'm left standing, my breaths heavy and erratic, in the eerie stillness of the forest. The transformation reverses as quickly as it came on, and I find myself back in my human form. My clothes are ripped to shreds, hanging off my frame in tattered remnants. At my feet lies what's left of my dad, his body torn and unrecognizable. I glance down at my abdomen, expecting agony, but instead find my wound miraculously healed. No sign of the gunshot remains, just a faint scar where I expected a bloody mess. Shock sets in, a numbing disbelief mixed with a gut-wrenching realization of what I've become and what I've done. My hands, now human, tremble as I look at them, half expecting to see the claws that had so effortlessly ripped through flesh and bone. But there's only blood, my father's blood against my skin. I stand there for what feels like an eternity, trapped in a nightmare of my own making. Eventually, the shock wears thin, and a cold practicality takes hold. I need to get out of here. I need to cover my tracks, to disappear, because who would believe this? Who would understand that I didn't choose this? That I'm not a monster by choice? With trembling hands, I do what's necessary. I bury my dad in a shallow grave. The physical act of digging strangely grounding. I cover him with leaves and branches, a pitiful attempt to hide the brutality of his end. I take a moment, whispering apologies into the wind, knowing full well that nothing I say can change what happened. I leave the forest behind, my mind a whirl of dark thoughts. As I walk, the first hints of dawn brush against the horizon, the sky bleeding a soft pink. It's hauntingly beautiful. Thank you for venturing into the darkness with us. If you dare to explore further, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more spine-tingling tales of horror and the supernatural. Remember, The shadows hold endless mysteries, waiting to be unveiled. Stay tuned for more bone-chilling stories as we continue to traverse the eerie depths of the unknown together. Until next time, may your dreams be free from the haunting echoes of our tales. Or perhaps not.